Ever hear about criminal organizations that seem to, well, pop up everywhere, involved in everything from, local street crime right up to major international incidents?
Mhm.
Today, we're going to dive into the, frankly, pretty surprising world of organized crime that originates from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And believe me, the scope, the
Right.
sheer variety of what they do, it might just leave you a little stunned.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's quite something. We've waded through quite a bit of material, articles, reports to try and piece together a clearer picture of these networks.
Right.
And our mission, really, for you listening, is to help understand where they came from, how they're set up, who the main figures are, and crucially, the impact they have globally.
Right.
Because often they're operating thousands of miles away from Bosnia itself.
Yeah. Involved in just an astonishing range of stuff. Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Where did this all kick off?
Our sources point to the early 1990s, right, in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yeah, that seems to be the formative period for what people often call the Bosnian Mafia.
That's the period, yeah.
Yeah.
Early 90s. But it wasn't like flicking a switch. It developed, evolved over time during a very turbulent period.
And while the roots are there in Bosnia and Herzegovina, their reach, it didn't stay local for long.
Not at all. It spread out pretty quickly. We're talking Western Europe, all across to former Yugoslavia, obviously, but then
Yeah.
leaping continents,
Right.
South America, North America. It really became a transnational issue.
And what's interesting, too, is that these aren't groups defined strictly along ethnic lines, are they? The sources mention Bosniaks, Bosnian Serbs, Bosnian Croats, all involved.
That's a really important point. It seems it's not really about those old divisions for these groups.
Hmm.
The unifying factor seems to be, well, the business,
Hmm.
the criminal enterprise itself. It sort of transcends those historical ethnic lines for profit.
Okay, so let's talk about that business. The sheer list of activities is,
Ah.
wow. It's almost overwhelming.
It really is.
You've got drug trafficking, massive cigarette smuggling, apparently pulling in hundreds of millions of euros, which is staggering in itself.
Right. Huge numbers, yeah. Between 600 and 900 million euros estimated.
Then there's assassination, bank fraud, blackmailing, bribery, contract killing, even getting deep into politics.
And it doesn't stop there. Add money laundering, murder, corruption, both police and political witness, intimidation, witness tampering, illegal gambling, human trafficking, extortion. It's like a full-service criminal conglomerate.
It really is. And you wonder how these different activities might, feed into each other.
Exactly, they often do. Laundering the money from drugs, through gambling perhaps, or using extortion rackets to fund other operations.
But there was one specific incident mentioned that really jumped out at me. The alleged smuggling and sale of, get this, 250,000 AK-47s, Zastava M70s, to Iraq back in 2003.
Right, 250,000 assault rifles.
That's not small-time smuggling. That's potentially influencing conflicts on a massive scale. Really shows their reach, doesn't it?
It absolutely underscores the potential global impact. It's
Yeah.
far beyond just, petty crime or even regional drug routes. This is geopolitical.
So, okay, they have this huge international reach, but what about back home? In Bosnia and Herzegovina itself, fighting these groups must be incredibly difficult.
Oh, it is hugely difficult. And a major part of the problem is, well, corruption. It's described as a severe issue.
Right.
But also the very structure of the government complicates things immensely.
Yeah.
You've got this federalist setup with two largely independent entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska,
Each with its own capital, parliament, president.
and crucially, its own police force.
So two separate police forces operating within one country. How does that actually play out when tackling crime?
Well, it creates gaps.
Yeah.
Big ones. The cooperation between the law enforcement agencies and the two entities has historically been, well, poor, limited at best.
So criminals can just hop across the internal border.
Pretty much. If things get too hot in one entity, they can potentially move to the other and effectively evade prosecution, at least for a while. It's like having neighboring countries with police forces that barely talk to each other. A perfect scenario if you want to stay ahead of the law.
And it's not just the homegrown groups exploiting this, right? The sources say groups from Serbia and Croatia actually like using Sarajevo as a base.
That's right. Sarajevo's location makes it quite strategic, a convenient hub for coordinating activities that might span the entire region, or even further afield. It acts as a sort of central node.
But there must have been some efforts to fix this lack of cooperation.
Yes, there have been, and the EU actually stepped in. Back in 2006, they helped establish SIPA, the State Investigation and Protection Agency.
SIPA.
Yeah, it's a Bosnian federal police agency.
Hmm.
The key thing is it has authority in both entities. It operates under the National Ministry of Security, aiming to improve that cross-entity coordination on serious crime.
Okay, so an attempt to bridge that gap. Now let's shift focus a bit. The materials talk about a kind of changing of the guard, a new generation of criminals emerging in Sarajevo, especially as some of the older historical underworld figures have died or faded away.
That's right. There's definitely talk of a new wave. And what's striking is how young some of these individuals are, yet they already have pretty extensive records.
Like who? Any names stand out.
Well, there's Mirza Hadic, born in '87. Police apparently recorded him 20 times just for attempted murder and other things since 2002, so from when he was about 15.
20 times. Wow.
Yeah. Then there's a figure named Almer Inahilovic, arrested 17 times, robbery, violence, extortion. He's apparently known specifically for racketeering local caterers.
Racketeering caterers. That really brings it down to the street level, how these big networks can impact ordinary businesses.
Exactly. It's not all high-level international stuff. Then you have Edmir Lekic, attempted murder accusations, violence, weapons charges. He actually got a 10-year sentence for attempted murder. The sources also flag Momir Kulazman and Adi Karic as notorious racketeers in Sarajevo. And finally, Benjamin Delalic.
Delalic. That name rings a bell from the historical figures.
Yes, he's the son of Ramiz Delalic, a major figure who died in 2007. Benjamin, born in '93, apparently had police records even as a minor and is allegedly caught up in shootings between rival gangs. So you see continuation, sometimes even within families.
Yeah, it seems these patterns are quite persistent. New faces, same game, almost. Okay, let's look outwards again. This expansion to South America. What's pulling Bosnian groups there?
It really boils down to one thing, primarily drugs, specifically cocaine.
Right, the source.
Exactly. South America is the major production hub for cocaine heading to the lucrative European market. So logically, groups want to get closer to the source, control more of the supply chain.
And we're seeing arrests reflecting this.
We are. Numerous Bosnian nationals have been arrested in various South American countries, often linked to trafficking large quantities of cocaine back towards Europe. The names David Kufaj and Smail Yikalo are mentioned as examples of this trend. It shows a definite strategic move.
Okay, and speaking of major drug operations, this brings us to a name that seems unavoidable in this context, the Tito and Dino cartel. That sounds significant.
Oh, it is. Very significant. The Tito and Dino cartel, allegedly led by a figure named Edin Kacanin, is considered a powerhouse in European drug trafficking.
How big are we talking?
Some reports suggest they control maybe one-third of all the cocaine coming into the port of Rotterdam.
Rotterdam, that's one of Europe's biggest ports. A third. That's an incredible amount of control.
It's massive. And their influence isn't just on the distribution side. They're reportedly major players in Peru, maybe even the main buyers of drugs in that region, getting right to the source.
And the DEA, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, they rank them highly.
Very highly. They consider the cartel's network one of the top 50 largest drug trafficking operations globally. That puts it in perspective.
Definitely. What do we know about how this cartel is structured? Is it like a corporation?
Interestingly, investigations suggest it's quite tight-knit, largely composed of family members and close friends, many apparently from Kacanin's old neighborhood back in Sarajevo.
So built on trust and existing relationships.
Exactly, which often makes these groups harder to infiltrate. As of 2021, their main base of operations was reportedly Dubai.
Dubai. That location seems to pop up a lot with these high-level international networks.
It does seem to be a favorite hub, unfortunately, maybe due to financial systems or extradition laws, perhaps.
What's the latest on the leader, Edin Kacanin? Has law enforcement caught up with him?
Well, it's complicated. He was arrested in Dubai. That was in November 2022, part of a big Europol operation. Things look promising for prosecutors.
Okay.
But despite the Netherlands filing extradition papers, he was released on bail in January 2023. And since then, his current whereabouts are reportedly unknown.
Released. After being flagged as a top 50 global trafficker, that's frustrating for law enforcement, I imagine.
Extremely. It really highlights the challenges of international cooperation and dealing with different legal systems. And just to add another layer, in 2023, the U.S. hit Kacanin with sanctions.
Why?
They cited his close ties to another major group, the Irish Kinahan Organized Crime Group, and linked him to a massive $350 million cocaine plot.
So these big cartels aren't just operating in isolation, they're connected.
Absolutely. It's a network of networks.
Hmm.
Interconnected, sometimes collaborating, sometimes competing. It's a complex global web.
Okay, shifting gears slightly again, there's another group mentioned, the United Tribans. This sounds different, more like a biker gang.
Yeah, they fit more into that sort of rocker or outlaw motorcycle club mold, although maybe not strictly bikers. It's a criminal organization founded in Germany, actually, back in 2004.
Many, but with Bosnian connections.
Yes, the founder was Arman Olim, who came to Germany as a refugee during the Bosnian War. So the Bosnia link is right there at the origin.
And how did they present themselves initially?
They tried to cultivate a somewhat legitimate image, describe themselves as an association of like bodybuilders, martial artists, bouncers, doormen, that kind of thing.
A sort of brotherhood of tough guys?
Pretty much. But the reality was much darker.
Hmm.
The group has now been banned in Germany since 2022
Banned? Why?
for a whole range of serious crimes. Exploitative pimping, serious assaults, drug trafficking, human trafficking, the typical activities of serious organized crime groups, really.
So, banned in Germany, but are they still active elsewhere?
Yes. Despite the German ban, they're known to have a presence in at least 4 countries. Germany still, Austria, Bosnia itself, where they have a subgroup called Tribun's Guardians Balkan, and Spain.
Tribun's Guardians Balkan. Okay. Any idea of their numbers?
Figures are always tricky, but a report back in 2014 from the Bavarian State Security estimated around 1,700 members worldwide. So not insignificant. The German federal ban in September 2022 really solidified their status as a major cross-border criminal organization.
Right. So we've seen these sophisticated globe-spanning drug cartels like Tito and Dino, and then these more street level but still transnational gangs like United Tribuns. It's a really wide spectrum.
Right.
Are there any other specific individuals, key players mentioned in the sources that we should maybe touch on beyond the new Sarajevo generation and the cartels?
Yeah, a few other names pop up as significant figures linked to organized crime over the years. People like Nazir Kelmendi, he's an older figure, born in 57.
Yep.
Then Darko Elez, Ori Ujral, Admir Arnautovic. These are younger guys, born around 1980, 1976.
Okay.
And just for historical context, the sources also nod to figures from the past, like Ramiz Delic, who we mentioned earlier, died in 2007, and also Yusuf Pozina and Mushan Topalovic, both significant figures in the Sarajevo underworld who died back in 1993 during the war period.
So it's clear this isn't a new phenomenon. It has deep, complex roots going back decades.
Definitely. A long and often violent history.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this step dive, what are the main things you think we and you listening should really take away from all this?
I think there are a few key things. First, the deep historical roots and the fact that this is still evolving, it's not static. Second, the incredible diversity of criminal activities they're involved in. It's not just one thing.
Right.
Third, those internal challenges within Bosnia and Herzegovina itself. The government structure, the cooperation issues that make tackling it so hard domestically. And fourth, probably the most striking for many, is the sheer global reach these groups have achieved.
Yeah, that global reach is the kicker, isn't it? Especially the Tito and Dino cartel controlling potentially such a huge chunk of the European cocaine market. That's impact on a massive scale.
It absolutely is. It really illustrates how far these networks extend and the kind of power they can wield internationally.
It's definitely easy to maybe underestimate the scope, isn't it? You hear Bosnian Mafia and maybe think it's localized, but this deep dive, wow. It shows tendrils reaching everywhere, involved in so many different illicit things, often in ways you just wouldn't expect.
Indeed. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought, a question really, for you to ponder.
Okay.
What are the underlying factors? The complex mix of socio-political issues, maybe economic factors, historical legacies that allow such extensive organized crime networks to develop and persist, not just in Bosnia, but globally. And then what are the real implications of that for international security, for law enforcement, trying to keep up with these constantly evolving borderless threats?
That's a heavy question, definitely something to think about long after we finish talking. The sheer complexity and the ongoing challenge it represents.
Exactly. It's a challenge that isn't going away anytime soon.